We live in an era where distance is supposedly conquered by a green dot and a tiny icon that reads seen. We tell ourselves comforting lies every single day to soften the blow of a fading connection. When a text sits there for hours with no reply, or worse, when a phone call rings out into the void and is replaced instantly by a cold, transactional message asking, "Can I call you later?" our minds immediately leap to defense mechanisms. We call it being busy. We tell ourselves that work is demanding, that life is chaotic, that modern burnout is a real epidemic, and that a lack of communication does not equal a lack of care. We become professional apologists for the people who are slowly exiting our lives, drafting excuses on their behalf because accepting the alternative feels entirely too heavy to carry. The dangerous illusion we cling to is that busyness is a neutral state. We treat time as a finite resource that runs out completely for certain people while somehow remaining abundantly available for scrolling, posting, and interacting with everyone else. But let us strip away the polite fiction and look at the raw, unvarnished mechanics of human behavior. Nobody is ever too busy for someone they are terrified of losing. When a person genuinely values your presence in their daily existence, silence is not a default setting, it is an anomaly. They do not accidentally forget to check in. They do not spend entire weekends accidentally ignoring a voice note from someone who matters. The truth is much simpler, much sharper, and infinitely more painful to digest. The delay is not a logistical hurdle, it is a deliberate choice born from a shifting priority list. Think about your own habits for a moment. When you care deeply about an outcome, when a conversation carries weight and emotional currency, you do not leave it hanging in digital limbo. You make space, even if it is just a hurried second to acknowledge the other person, because you instinctively know that leaving someone in the dark breeds insecurity. Yet, we watch others do the exact opposite to us, and we accept it. We accept the crumbs of their attention disguised as a quick scene receipt or a late-night emoji reaction. We treat these crumbs like a feast because we are terrified of starving. We rationalize that a quick glance at a screen counts as communication, forgetting that eye contact across a room holds more truth than 1,000 digital acknowledgments that carry zero emotional investment. As days bleed into weeks, this pattern hardens into a terrifyingly quiet architecture of emotional detachment. The scene receipt stops being a temporary delay and morphs into a permanent monument of indifference. They are not just ignoring your messages, they are actively training themselves to stop factoring you into their daily mental landscape. Every time they delay a response, they build a tiny psychological wall. Every time they choose silence over a simple call, they practice a little bit of independence from your history together. This is the hidden mechanism of modern drift. People do not usually break ties in explosive arguments or dramatic confrontations. They fade out through micro-habits of neglect. They slowly remove the emotional weight of your existence until talking to you feels less like a natural reflex and more like a chore they have to check off their list. The most agonizing part of this silent eviction is watching yourself participate in your own erasure. You notice the frequency dropping, you see the excuses becoming lazier, yet you keep lowering your standards to match their declining effort. You send shorter messages so as not to look desperate. You hold back your thoughts because you have learned that long paragraphs only invite longer periods of silence. You begin editing your own life, censoring your excitement, and swallowing your desire to reach out, all because you are trying to fit inside the shrinking box of convenience they have assigned to you. You become a quiet observer of your own displacement, walking on eggshells inside a relationship that used to be a safe harbor of unfiltered expression. Then comes the moment of harsh clarity, the sudden flash of insight that strips away all your self-deception. You realize that you are mourning someone who is still breathing, still active, and still sharing their world with everyone else except you. The grief is confusing because there is no funeral, no official ending, just a slow fading of warmth replaced by the chilling efficiency of an automated acknowledgement. You understand that their silence is not a temporary storm you have to weather, it is their new climate. They have adapted to your absence long before you had the courage to accept it. They have filled the space you used to occupy with new routines, new distractions, and new priorities that do not require your name to be spoken aloud. Accepting this truth requires a brutal confrontation with your own ego. It means admitting that your loyalty, your patience, and your constant availability could not anchor someone who decided to let go. But within that heavy realization lies an unexpected, piercing sense of liberation. The moment you stop making excuses for their absence is the moment you stop abandoning yourself. You stop checking the screen every 3 minutes. You stop analyzing the exact timestamp of their last activity. You realize that chasing after someone who responds out of obligation is a slow form of self-sabotage. True connection never begs for crumbs, and real affection never hides behind a status update. Ultimately, the transition from an active conversation to a cold scene receipt is the universe's blunt way of clearing space. It teaches you that forcing someone to remember you is worse than being forgotten entirely. When people start practicing how to live without you, your most dignified response is to stop interrupting their practice. Let them have the silence they are so desperately curating. Walk away from the screen, close the chat windows of unreturned affection, and redirect that immense reservoir of care back toward yourself. You cannot wake someone who is only pretending to be asleep, and you certainly cannot force warmth from someone who has chosen to live in the cold. They practiced silence until you became a stranger. You learned your worth and stopped asking them to stay.